The medical frigate Gentle Passage drifted through the darkness of the shroud, nebula like a wounded animal trying to hide from predators. Commander Ithra Selvan stood on the bridge and watched the stars through the cracked viewport. Her forearms hung at her sides. Her iridescent scales, usually bright blue and green, had turned pale gray with exhaustion and fear. 3 days ago, the Dominion fleet had found them. The Gentle Passage carried no weapons. Medical ships were forbidden from carrying weapons under Galactic Accord. They were supposed to be safe. They were supposed to be protected by law and honor. The Dominion cared nothing for law or honor. The ambush had lasted only minutes. The Gentle Passage had escaped into the Shroud Nebula, but the ship was dying. The main engines were destroyed. Life support worked at half power. They moved through space using only small emergency thrusters, traveling nowhere slowly. Ithra turned away from the viewport and looked at her bridge crew. There were only 12 of them now. Ensign Koreth worked the sensor station with 2 broken arms wrapped in bandages. Lieutenant Mira, the navigation officer, had not slept in 40 hours. Her eyes were red and empty. Below them, in the belly of the ship, 2,000 souls waited for salvation or death. Wounded soldiers filled the medical bays. Refugee families huddled in cargo holds that had been converted into living spaces. Children slept on blankets spread across cold metal floors. Old ones sat in silence and remembered better times. Ithra was responsible for all of them. She had promised to bring them home. Now she wondered if any of them would see home again. "Commander," Ensign Koreth said. His voice was quiet. "I am detecting 3 ships entering the nebula. They are scanning for us." Ithra closed her eyes for a moment. She had expected this. The Shroud Nebula was a known hunting ground for pirates and slavers. A crippled medical ship full of refugees was exactly the kind of prey they loved. "Can you identify them?" she asked. Koreth's scales turned white with fear. "Koreth for raiders, Commander. 3 assault cruisers. They will find us within the hour." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew what the Krethver were. They were slavers. They captured people from weaker species and sold them to the highest bidder. They did not follow any laws. They did not show any mercy. The Galactic Accord meant nothing to them. Ithra walked to the communication station. Her legs felt heavy, like they were made of stone. "Open a channel," she said. "Broadcast on all emergency frequencies." "Commander," Lieutenant Mira said softly, "no one patrols the shroud. No one will hear us." "I know," Ithra said. "But we must try. We owe our passengers that much." The communications officer activated the distress beacon. Ithra leaned close to the microphone and spoke clearly. "This is Commander Ithra Selvan of the Volcari medical frigate Gentle Passage. We are stranded in the Shroud Nebula with critical damage. We carry 2,000 civilians, including wounded and children. We are being hunted by hostile forces. We request immediate assistance from any vessel able to respond. Please help us." The message went out into the void. It traveled through empty space where no patrol ships flew. It echoed through regions that civilized species had abandoned long ago. It reached into the darkness and found nothing. But Ithra did not know that her communications officer had done something unusual. The young officer had included one extra frequency in the broadcast. It was a frequency that most Volcari considered a myth, a story told to children. It was called the Human Emergency Band. The humans were a young species. They had only been traveling through space for about 200 years. They were considered primitive by the older races. Their ships were thought to be slow. Their technology was thought to be simple. Most species ignored them completely, but there were stories. Strange stories. Stories about human ships appearing in impossible places. Stories about human crews fighting battles they could not win and somehow winning anyway. Stories about humans who answered calls for help that no one else would answer. Ithra did not believe these stories. She had never met a human. She did not expect to meet one now. She turned to face her crew. "Begin preparations," she said. Her voice was steady, even though her hearts were breaking. "Move all passengers to the inner compartments. Disable the main computer core. We cannot let the Krethver access our navigation records." "Commander," Karth asked, "what about the soldiers who cannot walk?" Ithra paused. She knew what he was really asking. The wounded soldiers in the medical bay knew what capture by the Krethver meant. Many of them had already requested poison capsules. They preferred death to slavery. "Give them the choice," Ithra said quietly. "It is their right." The next hour passed like a nightmare that would not end. Ithra walked through the ship and spoke with her passengers. She held the hands of frightened children and promised them that everything would be fine. She lied to them with love in her hearts because the truth was too terrible to speak. In the medical bay, 17 soldiers chose the capsules. Ithra stood with each of them as they made their peace with the universe. She learned their names. She promised to remember them. She watched them close their eyes for the last time. When the Krethver ships finally appeared on the sensors, Ithra was back on the bridge. She had changed into her formal uniform. If she was going to die today, she would die as a commander of the Valkyrie fleet. "They are hailing us," the communications officer said, on screen. The face that appeared was nightmare-made flesh. Warmaster Gronak of the Krethver was massive, with gray skin covered in ritual scars and eyes that held no light. He smiled when he saw Ithra, showing rows of sharp yellow teeth. "The little Valkyrie," he said. "You have something I want. Your cargo. Your fuel. Your people. Surrender them to me, and I will make your deaths quick. Resist, and I will make them slow." Ithra stood tall. Her scales shifted to deep purple, the color of Valkyrie defiance. "These people are under my protection. I will not surrender them to slavers." Gronek laughed. "You have no weapons. You have no engines. You have no hope. I give you 10 minutes to reconsider. After that, I will tear your ship open and take what I want anyway." The screen went dark. Ithra turned to her crew. They looked at her with eyes full of fear and trust and love. These were good people. They deserved better than this. "Begin the death prayers," she said softly. The Valkyrie had a prayer for moments like this. It was old, older than space travel, older than their civilization. Ithra spoke the words quietly as the minutes counted down. Around her, her crew joined in. Below them, in the passenger compartments, 2,000 voices rose together in the ancient song. They prepared to perish. And then the universe changed forever. The death prayer filled the bridge of the gentle passage with soft, sad music. Commander Ithra Selvan sang the ancient words with her crew, her voice steady even as her hearts broke into pieces. 8 minutes remained before Warmaster Gronak would attack. 8 minutes before the end of everything. Lieutenant Myra suddenly stopped singing. Her eyes went wide as she stared at her navigation console. "Commander," she whispered. "Something is happening?" Ithra moved to her side. "What do you see?" "I do not know. The readings make no sense. There is energy building in Sector 7. But that is impossible. There are no hyperlanes in Sector 7. The Shroud Nebula has no stable routes anywhere near that location." On the main view screen, the 3 Krethver ships waited like predators, watching trapped prey. They had not noticed anything unusual. They were too focused on the helpless medical frigate before them. Ensign Karith gasped. "Commander, my sensors are going insane. Energy levels are rising beyond anything I have ever recorded. Something is tearing through space itself." And then they all heard it. It started as a low rumble that vibrated through the hull of the gentle passage. The sound grew louder and louder until it became a howl, a scream, a roar of pure power ripping through the fabric of reality. The darkness of space split open like a wound and light poured through. Brilliant and terrible. A ship emerged from the impossible tier in space. It was black, matte black, darker than the void around it. It was covered in weapons, more weapons than Ithra had ever seen on a single vessel. Strange symbols decorated its hull in white paint, symbols she did not recognize. The ship was not elegant like Valkyrie vessels. It was not decorative like Krethver raiders. It looked brutal. It looked angry. It looked like it had been built for one purpose, and one purpose only. War. The communication system crackled with static, and then a voice spoke. It was a female voice, calm and clear and absolutely confident. The voice spoke in perfect Valkyrie, translated through some kind of advanced system. Valkyrie vessel gentle passage. This is Captain Elena Vance of the United Nations ship Consequence. We heard your distress call. We are here to help. Cavalry's arrived. Ithra stared at the view screen. Her mind could not process what she was seeing. Humans, she breathed. The humans came. That is impossible, Lieutenant Mira said. Humans do not have ships that can travel through unstable space. Their technology is primitive. Everyone knows this. On the view screen, the UN's Consequence moved with smooth, terrible grace. It positioned itself directly between the gentle passage and the three Krethver raiders. It did not hesitate. It did not ask for permission. It simply placed itself in the line of fire. War Master Gronanak's face appeared on the screen again. He was no longer smiling. His eyes narrowed as he studied the human vessel. What is this? He demanded. What species dares to interfere with Krethver business? Captain Vance's response came over the open channel. Her voice was polite but cold, like ice covering deep water. War Master, I am Captain Vance of the Terran Union. The vessel behind me has claimed protection under Galactic Accord Article 7. They are a medical ship carrying wounded and refugees. You will withdraw immediately. Gronak laughed. It was an ugly sound. Terran Union? Humans? You are children playing in the darkness. Your species learned to walk among the stars only yesterday. Go home, little ape. This does not concern you. I disagree, Captain Vance said. The safety of innocent people always concerns me. Innocent? Gronanak leaned forward, his scarred face filling the screen. There are no innocents in the shroud. There are only predators and prey. You are prey, human. Your ship is alone. You face 3 Krethver assault cruisers. The mathematics of this situation are simple. I was never very good at mathematics, Vance replied. Last warning, War Master. Withdraw now, or face the consequences. Gronanak turned to someone off-screen and gave an order in his own language. Then he looked back at the camera with murder in his eyes. Destroy the human ship. Then take the Valkyrie. I want them all alive. Especially the captain of that foolish vessel. I will teach her what happens to those who challenge the Krethva. The communication ended. On the bridge of the Gentle Passage, Ithra watched in horror as the 3 Krethver ships began to move. Their weapons powered up, glowing red with deadly energy. They spread out into an attack formation surrounding the lone human vessel. They will destroy her, Ensign Korath said. She came to save us, and now she will die. Ithra felt tears forming in her eyes. She had never met Captain Vance. She did not know anything about humans. But this stranger had traveled through impossible space to answer a call for help, and now she would be killed for her courage. The Consequence did not move. It did not retreat. It did not try to escape. Why does she not run? Lieutenant Myra asked. The answer came a moment later. The human ship began to change. Panels opened along its hull, revealing more weapons than Ithra could count. The engines glowed with strange blue light. An energy field shimmered into existence around the vessel, surrounding it like a second skin. Captain Vance's voice came over the open channel one final time. She was no longer speaking to Gronanek. She was speaking to her own crew, but she had left the channel open so everyone could hear. All hands, this is the captain. We have 3 hostile vessels preparing to fire. Rules of engagement are as follows. We protect the medical ship. We disable enemy weapons and engines. We take prisoners for trial. Nobody dies unless they force us to kill them. She paused for a moment. And people? Let us show these slavers why you do not threaten humans or anyone under our protection. A sound came from the consequence. It was a strange sound, a sound that Ithra had never heard before. It took her a moment to realize what it was. The human crew was cheering. The Krethver ships opened fire. Beams of red destruction lanced through space toward the lone human vessel. Ithra held her breath and waited for the consequence to die. The beams struck the shimmering shield around the human ship. Light flared across the barrier. Energy crackled and spark dot, and the consequence barely moved. The shields held. The weapons did nothing. 3 Krethver assault cruisers fired everything they had at a single human vessel, and the vessel shrugged off the attack like it was nothing. Ithra's legs went weak. She grabbed the edge of a console to keep from falling. Around her, her crew stared at the view screen with expressions of pure shock. Impossible, Lieutenant Mira whispered. That is completely impossible. On the bridge of the consequence, Captain Vance gave a single quiet order. Return fire. The human weapons began to glow. And War Master Gronak, for the first time in his long and bloody life, felt something he had never felt before. Fear. The battle lasted 93 seconds. Commander Ithra Selvan would remember every moment of it for the rest of her life. The UNS Consequence moved through space with a grace that seemed impossible for a ship of its size. It twisted and turned between the Krethver attack formations like water flowing between stones. The human vessel did not fight like other ships fought. It did not circle its enemies or exchange fire from a distance. It attacked with brutal speed and perfect precision. The first Krethver ship lost its engines in the opening seconds. A beam of pure white light lanced from the consequence and struck the Raider's propulsion systems. The engines exploded in a ball of fire and twisted metal. The ship spun wildly, suddenly unable to control its movement. War Master Gronanek screamed orders at his remaining ships. Focus fire on their weapons. Destroy their cannons. Kill them. They, 2 functioning Raiders, turned all their weapons toward the human vessel. Red beams and missiles filled the space around the consequence. The human shields flared with each impact, glowing bright blue under the assault. But the shields held. They held against everything the Krethver could throw at them. Captain Vance's voice came over the open channel, calm and cold. Targeting their weapons array. Fire. The consequence struck the second Raider with surgical precision. Instead of trying to destroy the ship completely, the human gunners targeted specific systems. They hit the main cannon first, turning it into scrap metal. Then they hit the secondary batteries, the missile launchers, the point defense systems. Within 12 seconds, the second Krethver ship had no weapons left. It drifted helplessly, still intact but completely unable to fight. Gronanek watched his fleet being dismantled with growing terror. This was not possible. Humans were primitives. Everyone knew this. Their species had barely learned to travel between stars. How could they have weapons like this? How could they have shields like this? Retreat, he ordered. All ships, fall back. The third Raider tried to run. Its engines flared with maximum power as it attempted to escape into the depths of the Shroud Nebula. For a moment, It seemed like the ship might get away. It was fast, and the nebula was full of hiding places. Then the consequence did something that Ithra had never seen before. A strange device on the front of the human ship began to glow with purple light. The light grew brighter and brighter until it was painful to look at directly. Then a beam of twisted energy shot forward and struck the fleeing raider. Space itself seemed to bend around the Krethra ship. The vessel slowed down even though its engines were still burning at full power. Then, impossibly, it began to move backward. The ship was being dragged through space by some invisible force, pulled toward the human vessel like a fish on a hook. "What is that weapon?" Lieutenant Mira gasped. "What are they doing?" Ithra shook her head. She had no answer. She had never even heard of technology like this. The fleeing raider was dragged back into weapons range. It struggled against the strange force, but escape was impossible. Captain Vance's gunners went to work with the same cold efficiency they had shown before. Engines first, then weapons. Then communications. In less than 2 minutes, all 3 Krethra assault cruisers were disabled and drifting. Thousands of slavers who had expected an easy victory now floated helplessly in space, waiting to see if the humans would kill them. Groninek's face appeared on the view screen. He looked different now. The confidence was gone from his eyes. The cruel smile had disappeared from his face. He looked like what he truly was beneath all the scars and muscles. A bully who had finally met someone stronger than himself. "Mercy," he said. His voice cracked on the word. "I ask for mercy. We surrender. Take whatever you want. Just let us live." Captain Vance's response was immediate. "War Master Gronak, you and your crews are now prisoners of the Terran Union. You will be transported to Hegemony Station for trial under galactic law. The charges will include piracy, attempted slavery, and violation of Galactic Accord protections for medical vessels." "Trial?" Gronak seemed confused. "You are going to put us on trial?" "Yes," Vance said simply. "That is how justice works. You threatened innocent people. You will answer for that in a court of law. Slavers do not get mercy from me, War Master, but they do get process. They get fair trials with evidence and witnesses. And when they are found guilty, they go to prison for the rest of their lives." Gronak started to argue, but the communication was cut off. The conversation was over. On the bridge of the Gentle Passage, silence reigned. The Valkyrie crew stared at their view screens, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. The battle had been so fast, so one-sided, so completely unexpected that none of them could find words. Ithra finally spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper. "What are they?" No one had an answer. The consequence moved closer to the medical frigate. Its shields powered down. Its weapons stopped glowing. A small shuttle bay opened on its side, and a transport vessel emerged. "Commander," the communications officer said, "we are receiving a message from the human ship. Captain Vance is requesting permission to come aboard. She says she has medical teams standing by to help our wounded." Ithra nodded slowly. Tell her she is welcome. Tell her she is very welcome." She walked to the viewport and watched the human shuttle approaching. Her mind was full of questions. Why had they come? How had they known about the distress call? What kind of species traveled through impossible space to save strangers? She thought about all the things she had heard about humans over the years. They were primitive. They were simple. They were not important. Every major species in the galaxy dismissed them as children, barely worth noticing. Standing on her bridge, watching a human shuttle bring help to her dying ship, Ithra realized something important. Everyone was wrong about humans. Everyone had made a terrible mistake. These were not primitives. These were not children. These were something else entirely. And as she watched the shuttle dock with her ship, Ithra felt something she had not felt in days. Hope. The airlock opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. And then, for the first time in her life, Commander Ithra Selvan met a human. Her entire understanding of the universe was about to change. Captain Elena Vance was smaller than Ithra had expected. The commander of the vessel that had just destroyed 3 Krethver raiders stood barely 5.5 feet tall, with short gray hair and dark eyes that seemed to see everything. Her face was marked with old scars, and she moved with the careful economy of someone who had spent a lifetime in combat. She was not beautiful. She was not impressive to look at. But when she stepped onto the bridge of the General Passage, every Valkyrie in the room felt the power that radiated from her like heat from a star. "Commander Selvan," Vance said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture. "It is good to meet you. I am sorry we could not arrive sooner." Ithra took the offered hand carefully, feeling how small and warm it was compared to her own. "Captain Vance, I do not know what to say. You saved us. You saved 2,000 lives. That is why we came," Vance said simply. She turned to the human officers who had followed her aboard. "Dr. Chun, take your teams to the medical base. Commander Torres, coordinate with the Valkyrie engineering staff on emergency repairs. I want this ship able to move within 6 hours." The humans scattered throughout the General Passage like water filling cracks in stone. They did not wait for permission. They did not stand on ceremony. They simply saw work that needed doing and began doing it. Ithra watched in amazement as human doctors began treating her wounded. They worked side by side with Valkyrie medical staff, sharing equipment and knowledge without hesitation. In the engineering sections, human technicians crawled through damaged systems with tools that seemed impossibly advanced. "Captain," Ithra said slowly, "I must ask you something. I do not understand why you are here." Vance turned to face her. "We received your distress call, but the Shroud Nebula is a death zone. No one patrols here. No fleet sends ships to this region. The message I sent had almost no chance of reaching anyone who could help. Why would you answer such a call?" The human captain was silent for a long moment. She walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. When she spoke, her voice was soft. 112 years ago, a human colony ship became stranded in deep space. Their engines failed. Their life support was failing. They sent distress calls for weeks. They begged for help on every frequency. They promised anything to anyone who would save them. Vance turned back to face Ithra. No one came. The other species heard the calls. Some of them were close enough to help, but the humans were young and unimportant. Saving them would have cost time and resources. So the galaxy did the math and decided it was not worth the trouble. What happened to them? Ithra asked quietly. They died. All 6,000 of them. Men, women, children. They died cold and alone in the dark because no one thought they were worth saving. Vance's eyes were hard now, filled with an old pain that had never fully healed. We found their ship 50 years later. We recovered their bodies. We read their final messages. And we made a decision as a species. We decided that would never happen again. Not to us, not to anyone else. Not if we could stop it. Ithra felt her heart's twist in her chest. So you monitor the emergency frequencies. Constantly. Every ship, every station, every colony. If someone calls for help, we hear it. And if there is any chance at all that we can reach them in time, we go. But the journey here must have been incredibly dangerous. The hyperlanes in this region are unstable. Your crew could have died. Vance smiled slightly. It was a sad smile, but there was pride in it too. My crew voted on whether to attempt the journey. The vote was unanimous. They knew the risks. They chose to come anyway. Why? Ithra asked. Why would they risk their lives for strangers they have never met? Because that is who we are, Vance said. Humans run toward fire, Commander. When we see someone in trouble, we do not calculate the odds. We do not weigh the costs. We just go. It is not logical. It is not efficient. But it is right. A sound came from the corridor outside the bridge. Ithra turned and saw a small group of Valkyrie children being led past by one of her officers. They were refugees from the outer colonies, orphans whose parents had died in the Dominion attacks. They walked with their heads down, too tired and scared to look around. One of the children, a tiny girl barely old enough to walk properly, stopped and stared at Captain Vance. She had never seen a human before. Ithra started to apologize, but Vance held up a hand. The human captain knelt down until she was at eye level with the child. She smiled gently. "Hello there. What is your name?" The child did not answer. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object. It was a woven bracelet made of colorful threads, simple but beautiful. Among the Valkyrie, such gifts were sacred. They were given only to those who had earned deep gratitude and respect. The little girl held out the bracelet to Captain Vance. Vance looked at the gift, then at the child. Something changed in her face. The hardness melted away. For just a moment, she was not a warrior or a captain. She was simply a person who had been touched by an act of innocent kindness. She took the bracelet carefully, as if it were made of precious gems. "Thank you," she said softly. "I will treasure this forever." Then she did something that made Ithra's breath catch in her throat. The captain removed a small medal from her uniform, a silver disc that looked old and worn from years of service. She pinned the child's bracelet to her jacket, right next to that medal, treating the simple gift as equal to her highest military honor. The little girl smiled for the first time in weeks. Then she turned and ran to catch up with the other children. Vance stood and looked at Ithra. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, but her voice was steady. "That is why we came, Commander. That is why we will always come. Because somewhere out there, a child is scared and alone, and someone needs to tell her that everything will be okay." Ithra realized she was crying. She did not try to stop the tears. "Captain Vance," she said, "I think I finally understand humans." Vance shook her head. "You understand some of us. But Commander, we are not special. Every human would have done what my crew did today. Every single one. That is the thing about humanity that other species never seem to understand." She looked back out at the stars. "We are not strong because of our technology. We are not dangerous because of our weapons. We are terrifying because we choose to be kind, and we refuse to let cruelty go unanswered. Every time. No matter the cost." Ithra stood beside her and looked out at the universe. Everything had changed. Everything was different now, and somehow, impossibly, there was hope. 3 months had passed since the day the universe changed. "Commander," Ithra Selvin stood in the great hall of the Galactic Forum on Hegemony Station, surrounded by representatives from 100 different species. The chamber was enormous, with walls of crystal that showed the stars beyond. This was the place where laws were made and justice was served. This was the heart of galactic civilization. Today, the hall was more crowded than it had been in decades. Everyone had come to see history being made. War Master Gronak stood in chains at the center of the chamber. He was smaller than Ithra remembered, or perhaps he simply seemed smaller without his ships and weapons. His eyes darted around the room, searching for allies, for escape, for mercy. He found none of these things. The judge, an ancient being from a species so old they have forgotten their own homeworld, spoke in a voice like thunder. "War Master Gronak, you have been found guilty of piracy, attempted enslavement, and violation of Galactic Accord protections for medical vessels. The evidence against you is overwhelming. The testimony of survivors is beyond dispute. Do you have anything to say before sentencing? Gronak said nothing. For the first time in his life, he had no words. Then I sentence you and your crews to lifetime imprisonment on Coldstone Station. May your remaining years give you time to reflect on the suffering you have caused. Guards led the former War Master away. As he passed Ithra, he looked at her with eyes full of hate. She met his gaze without flinching. She had nothing to fear from him anymore. She would never have anything to fear from him again. When the chamber had quieted, the judge turned to face the assembly. We have one more piece of business before we adjourn. Commander Selvan of the Valkyrie Concord has requested to address the forum. Ithra walked to the speaking platform. Her scales shifted through colors of respect and determination as she looked out at the gathered representatives. She had practiced this speech 100 times, but now that the moment had arrived, she threw away her prepared words and spoke from her heart. 3 months ago, my ship was stranded in the Shroud Nebula. We were damaged and defenseless. We carried 2,000 refugees, wounded soldiers, and frightened children. We were hunted by slavers who cared nothing for law or mercy. We prepared to die. She paused, letting the silence build. And then a ship came out of the void to save us. Not a ship from a major power. Not a ship from an ancient civilization. A ship from a species that most of you have dismissed as primitive and unimportant. A human ship. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Ithra raised her voice. The humans traveled through unstable hyperlanes to reach us. They risked their lives for strangers they had never met. They defeated 3 armed raiders with a single vessel. And when the battle was over, they did not ask for payment or gratitude. They simply helped us repair our ship and continued on their way. She pointed to a figure standing near the back of the chamber. It was a human diplomat, a young woman with kind eyes and patient hands. The humans did not come here today to boast about what they did. That is not their way. But I came here to tell you about it, because I think you need to hear the truth. Ithra's voice dropped to nearly a whisper, but in the silent chamber, everyone heard her clearly. We've been wrong about humans. All of us. We looked at their short history and saw weakness. We looked at their simple ships and saw primitives. We were fools. She straightened to her full height. The humans are not powerful because of their technology, though their technology is far more advanced than we believed. They are not dangerous because of their weapons, though their weapons are terrible beyond imagination. The humans are extraordinary because they choose to be good. They choose to help. They choose to run toward danger when every logical calculation says they should run away. She turned to face the gathered representatives directly. I stand before you today to announce that the Valkyrie Concord is formally requesting alliance with the Terran Union. We want to learn from them. We want to work beside them. We want to be worthy of the kindness they showed us. The chamber erupted in noise. Some representatives shouted in protest. Others called out in support. The human diplomat simply stood quietly, a small smile on her face. Over the next year, 17 other species would make the same request. The humans accepted every one. Far away from Hegemony Station, in the cold depths of the Shroud Nebula, something new had appeared. Where once there was only darkness and danger, a beacon now pulsed with warm light. The humans had placed it there, in the exact spot where the gentle passage had been saved. The beacon broadcast a message in 400 languages. The message was simple, just a few words repeated over and over into the endless night. But those words meant everything to anyone who heard them. You are not alone. If you are in danger, call. We will come. On a distant planet, in a system that had never been visited by any of the major species, a ship was dying. Its crew was small, only a dozen beings from a species that had just learned to travel between stars. They had made a mistake, jumped too far, burned too much fuel. Now they drifted in the darkness, waiting for their air to run out. The captain, a young female with 4 eyes and trembling hands, sat at her communications console. She had sent distress calls for days, but no one had answered. She had given up hope. She was preparing to tell her crew that the end was coming. Then she heard the beacon. The message came through clearly, despite the vast distance. "You are not alone. If you are in danger, call. We will come." The captain stared at her console. She did not know who had sent the message. She did not know if anyone would really respond. But for the first time in days, she felt something other than despair. She opened a channel and began to speak. "This is Captain Vrel of the exploration vessel Bright Journey. We are stranded in unknown space. Our fuel is depleted. Our life support is failing. Please, if anyone can hear this message, please help us." Far across the galaxy, a human listening post detected the signal. Within minutes, a report reached the nearest Terran Union vessel. The crew gathered on the bridge to discuss the situation. The journey would be long and dangerous. The odds of reaching the stranded ship in time were small. The vote was unanimous. The ship changed course. The engines powered up. The crew prepared for the long journey ahead. And somewhere in the darkness, a young captain named Vrel looked out at the stars and allowed herself to hope. She did not know it yet, but help was coming. The humans were on their way, because that was what humans did. They answered when someone called. They came when someone needed help. They ran toward fire, always, no matter how far or how dangerous. And in a galaxy full of darkness and cruelty and fear, that simple truth changed everything. The void was not empty anymore. It was full of hope. And the hope had a name: humanity.